To begin this odyssey, we must first select one of the 5 sins on confession and sign on the line, hereby acknowledging the fullness and severity of the mistakes. An admission of guilt? Arguably, the first true sign that the denial is breaking. Speaking of,
the loathing festers. I remember our first meeting on the steps of the university. A collegial handshake that would doom us both. Your insightful questions during my lectures gave me pause, and I recognized in you something of a kindred spirit. Despite our differences in age and position, we shared a keen fascination for archaeology, folklore, and, of course, occultism.
Our story begins, as ones often do, with a teacher and a student, a professor and a pupil, the academic and the protege. The two met on the steps of the university. Shaking hands, the duo would develop a mutual respect over the semester. They were kindred spirits, despite the differences in age and occupation. They shared an interest in archaeology, folklore, and of course, occultism. They would often egress to a quiet table during the university's social gatherings to have a riveting discussion about esoteric theories and ancient mysteries. Taking walks in the woods between semesters, the academic considered the protege to be his brightest student, his research partner, and his dearest friend. The university's resources were adequate, but oftentimes they would also engage in first-hand experience, sneaking off and submerging themselves in books, scrolls, and other volumes of mythology. During one of those late-night reading sessions, the protege saw the symbol. It was this action of denying the truth that formed the shackles of denial on the mind, for the greatest lies are the ones we tell ourselves.
It was you who found the cipher, scribbled hastily in the decaying margins of some long-forgotten tome, scribbled in blood. Whether by providence or happenstance, we stumbled upon the mark of some strange power invoked the world over, reflected in cultures predating mankind itself. A semicircle radiating 5 points of power, a symbol hidden deep in the iconography of every ancient empire. The Iron Crown, enigmatic and ubiquitous.
It was the protege who found it, hidden in one of the old forgotten tomes. The pair continued to study the mark and found that it appeared in nearly every ancient culture across the world, concealed in the iconography, a symbol of power, the Iron Crown, a semicircle with 5 points of power radiating from their peaks. We know this symbol well. We saw it all over the estate during our visit there. We saw, but we didn't truly understand. Neither did the protege or the academic. They had discovered the symbol, but they hadn't understood what it was or even what it meant to invoke it.
The loathing whispers. Your vociferous calls to bring our findings before the faculty were dangerously premature. Given the gaps in our understanding, doing so would risk ridicule, or worse, robbery. I took no pleasure in asserting my seniority, stifling your protestations with a strict mandate of absolute secrecy. You acquiesced, but your plaintive susurrations betrayed a burgeoning resentment.
Eager to come forward with their research, the protege was stopped by the academic, who asserted his seniority in the relationship to keep the discovery under wraps. It pained him greatly. After all, he was a dear friend. The protege was eager to build a reputation, but the academic couldn't let them run half-blind into the scrutiny of their peers. If they presented their findings without fully understanding the gravity of the symbol, it would lead to ridicule, or worse, robbery of the idea. As the months passed, the anger would build in the protege. The seething sigh is the culmination of those feelings, the rage the protege felt when their research was destroyed.
The blaze began in the east wing of the Great Library. Within hours, the entirety of our effort lay in a smoldering, ashen heap. I braced against your rancorous buffeting, avowing a certain hesitant relief at our freedom from that mocking sigil. The uncanny arrival of the letter, however, heralded a new, pernicious phase of our investigation.
A fire started in the east wing of the library, where the protege and the academic had been storing their research. Months of work went up in a blaze. The protege was understandably furious, while the academic seemed almost relieved that they were free of the symbol. A strange duality between the two. It almost makes me wonder if the academic had a hand in the fire. Nothing more than a theory, of course. Did he do it to save his friend and their relationship? Or was he afraid his student would surpass him? Regardless, fate was not done with these two. A letter would arrive, bearing the sigil of the Iron Crown. It seemed like there was someone else who wanted to see their work come to fruition.
The loathing howls. We set out immediately into the kaleidoscopic wilds of the countryside, and by sundown reached the remote manor whose whereabouts formed the sole contents of that cryptic invitation. At the behest of our charismatic host, we feasted beneath the banner of the Iron Crown, questioned exhaustively by an eager cabal of masked delegates.
The academic and the protege followed the letter's instructions and took a journey into the countryside to a remote homestead. Once there, they found a charismatic host that we know all too well, the Ancestor, along with a group of masked occultists. The house was littered with artifacts that had the Iron Crown adorned upon them. Though the Ancestor insisted that the group was merely taking an anthropological interest, as the duo spoke to the masked individuals, it became clear that they had more than a theoretical desire. As the night wore on, the group drew circles of chalk, laid salt on the floor, lit black candles, and began to chant in long-forgotten tongues. They had planned for a ritual this evening. The situation was becoming dire. The academic insisted on retiring to their rooms, but the protege couldn't help but be enthralled by the prospect of discovery. Finally, the academic's protests of how vulnerable they were won out, and the duo barricaded the door to their room with a dresser and waited out the evening.
We awoke to an empty house. The garroted bodies of the attendees lay around the basement dais, each prostrate along a point of the crown. Our host conspicuously absent. I could scarcely countenance such obscenity. But you were transfixed, eyes ablaze with inspiration. The failed ritual would become your obsession. From that pivotal moment, you were blind to all else.
Some think this is the same manner from the estate, and even I will admit I thought so too, but now I don't believe so. This was another example of the ancestor trying and failing in his occult studies, then avoiding the consequences. He killed his fellow guests at the house and tried to invoke the Iron Crown, but was unable to, then took all his artifacts and abandoned the place, leaving a mess behind. Oh, classic ancestor. The academic was horrified by what he had seen, but the protege was transfixed, their focus set solely on the ritual. The protege became obsessed with understanding the ritual, figuring out what happened, how to perform it, and recreating it themselves. The focused fault is that obsession made manifest. The eyes fixated on something so horrible, yet so enticing. The idea was planted, a nudge in the right direction, and the protege would follow that path to the end of the world.
The loathing spreads. Refusing enrollment in the fall, you took up in that moldering brownstone, where I joined you in a vain attempt to assuage your aspirations. Now, free from academic oversight and moral restraint, you vowed to reach into the blackest depths of the occult sciences and be the first to grasp the secret of the Iron Crown. The polarity between us reversed. I became your reluctant assistant in dozens of deplorable experiments, crushed in the grip of your ambition.
The protege refused to re-enroll in the university that fall, and instead took up in a small study in the woods, where the academic would join them in a vain attempt to temper their ambitions. But now that they were free of academic oversight and moral restraint, the protege would delve into the darkest of occult science and vowed to be the one to uncover the secrets of the Iron Crown. They began their unethical research, which we have seen throughout our expeditions. The various academic studies and the relics found inside are monuments to the sins of those experiments. The protege incorporated what they had learned from those experiments into the Iron Crown, calibrating the prisms to the points of the crown with maddening glee, mapping the geometric proportions of the crown to sound frequencies until their ears bled. Life outside became nothing more than a forgotten dream as the crown consumed their world. In one desperate attempt, the academic prepared a breakfast for the protege, appealed to them to regain their senses and abandon this course of action. The protege flung the food on the floor. They were far past the point of reason. The Iron Crown consumed them and everything around them. Their careers, their lives, their friendship, and still the crown demanded more.
Unable to suffer your unprincipled overreach any longer, I made ready to depart, imploring you to rejoin me in more wholesome pursuits. Instead, you babbled of impossible measurements, ushering me down into the bolted cellar. In the dim light, I recoiled at the preparations you had made. 4 bodies laid out along the lateral points of the crown. As the dagger's blade revealed itself through my chest, I understood. I was to be the 5th.
The protege knew that the last sacrifice had to be their mentor, the academic. They ushered him down into the bolted cellar and revealed the other 4 sacrifices they had already made. With a plunge of the knife, the Protege stabbed the academic through the chest, killing their mentor and completing the ritual. The ravenous reach are the very hands that committed these crimes. They hit with the weight of the ambition carried by the Protege. We can even find the murder weapon at one of the academic studies, still dripping with blood. The Protege was successful. They had invoked the Iron Crown, and a new ruler sat upon the throne of the world.
The loathing consumes. A precise arrangement. The sacrifice of conscience. The abandonment of self. The Iron Crown had found its king. Upon your furrowed brow, the mathematics of our existence, the geometry of the cosmos. An ephemeral equation wholly expressed in negative space. To invoke its power was to refactor the most fundamental underpinnings of our fragile dimension. To imprint one's mind upon reality itself.
The invocation of the crown was complete. The world was yours to do with as you saw fit. The winds blew sour, the oceans roiled, and the earth shuddered at the coming change. The lands of our kingdom and its people changed. They turned into corrupted imitations of how the Protege remembered them, of how you remembered them. The city was set ablaze because you fixated on the fire in the library. The country folk became ravenous with hunger because of the dinner with the ancestor. The worst memories of your past became the blueprint for reality. They became islands of themselves in the void of emptiness that was our new world. And from that darkness came newly created horrors. The cult. You invoked the crown, and by its creation, only you can undo it. You fled in fear, unable to face your failures until the academic dragged you out of your denial and set you on a path towards redemption, pulling hope from the greatest source of pain and giving it to you for the future.
Here, at the nexus of ruin, loathing poured forth from the darkest recesses of your mind. Your failures took form, and the world bowed in honor of your great wretchedness. The stain of your bankruptcy frayed the very fabric of our dimension. But you were afraid to face what you had wrought and fled down the long road of your memories, hiding yourself away. I remember our first meeting on the steps of the university. You were golden, lit from within by the glow of potential. Finally, my friend, I would see that potential realized. It is time to reclaim the world from your weakness. Meet your derelictions with blazing defiance. The equation must be balanced.
The monsters at the mountains were manifestations of your sins, made real by the crown, and now we face them, all together. The worst parts of you combined.
Gaze now upon your great achievement, the sum total of your failings, your body of work. The carious gut of the coward, rife with toxic pusillanimity.
Starting with the gut of the coward. Imprinted upon the intestines are the faces of the other 4 sacrifices. From their mouths, they will spit gastric juices upon our party, inflicting blight damage at the end of the turn. Those heroes covered in gastric juices are susceptible to 2 other moves from the gut. Trammel, which will lock our heroes into position, and Catabolize, which will convert all the blight damage into a single immediate strike. The gut will also use acid reflux to continue to stack blight and bile damage. Controlling and mitigating the blight with items and tokens is the key to this phase.
Its infernal gaze pierces the veil of reality.
Pushing further up, we meet eye to eye with the infernal gaze, which combines the ravenous reach, the focused fault, and the seething sigh. It will use glare to mark our heroes with contempt, signaling who's next. The infernal gaze will hit the marked hero with a haymaker, causing ludicrous amounts of damage that cannot be avoided. The only option is to reduce its health enough to replace the haymaker with a wild haymaker. It will still hit hard, but it has a chance to be dodged. Otherwise, it'll pepper the party with strikes from its fists, knocking heroes back or locking them in place. And if a hero has too many positive tokens, it will steal them with Cowardice Gaze. Reducing the strength of the attacks, blinding the creature, or dodging are the only way to pass this phase.
Behold the hateful God upon his throne. Your failures made flesh.
The final stage of the fight is against the Hateful God, the twisted reflection of yourself, the living incarnation of your failures. It will cast shackles of the past upon the party that will block certain skills, much like the shackles of denial once did. The Hateful God will remind the heroes of the futility of their actions, shuffling the party and applying horror. As the overlord of this world, it is capable of inverting our heroes' tokens with strange axes. With Samsara, the Hateful God will summon Proclaimers, stronger versions of cherubs that will both support the Hateful God and attack the heroes. These Proclaimers give worship to the Hateful God, allowing it to use the ability, the Spreading Stain, pouring loathing right from the source, destroying any positive tokens and damaging the entire party. It may not seem like it, but the Proclaimers are the key to this fight. After the Proclaimers are destroyed, the Hateful God will call upon a hero to face your failures, at which point it will summon a ghost of the past, whose appearance is based upon the hero, the memories of the hero's shrines. They will only attack the chosen hero and can only be damaged by them too, for the strength to conquer their past must come from within. After their ghost is defeated, the hero will unleash their own version of exaltation upon the Hateful God. They will be cleared of the shackles of the past, their sins no longer weigh them down, and the path forward is clear.
Destroy this half-remembered specter. To destroy the thing is to destroy yourself. But the world will spring anew from the memory you kept of it. Your confession is complete. The cosmic axes are aligned once more. Forgive yourself. Humanity is a weak hypothesis, after all. An unbalanced equation, an imperfect angle. We sow the seeds of our ruin and seek to deny its reckoning. We make mountains of our mistakes, monsters of our misdeeds. We slip and stumble, we fail and we falter. And yet, in each of us, a hopeful light. Holding fast against the hellish shadows that gather between our good intentions. And in each of us, a limitless emptiness. Of a darkest dungeon.
By defeating the Hateful God, we have completed the final confession. In doing so, you destroy yourself in the process, but the world will be saved, reborn from your memories of it. With that, the equation is balanced. The cosmic axes are realigned. You have faced your failures, confessed your faults, and have made recompense with your sins. Now, you can forgive yourself. I realize this has all been a lot to take in. This story is very different from our last one. This one is about redemption, about facing your failures. But I have my own thoughts on all this too, especially the ending. When the academic says that humanity is a weak hypothesis, I have to wonder what he means exactly. If I had to hypothesize myself, I would say that the Iron Crown is something that shouldn't be invoked by humanity. The Protege pushed themselves beyond their own limits to invoke the Iron Crown, sowing the seeds of their ruin by denying their actions, and when the crown was invoked, their feelings came back in the form of loathing that poured out of their mind. The cost of successfully invoking the Iron Crown was their humanity. To bury and deny our sins is like making mountains that seem impassable and monsters that are nigh impossible to defeat. This is something that should not be wielded by humans. We make mistakes. That's what makes us human. We cannot hold ourselves to such a harsh punishment that can never be forgiven. Whatever we have done, whatever has been done to us or onto others, we can move past it. We can move forward as a better person, not despite our mistakes, but because of them. That is the hope that we are carrying with us to the mountain. Humanity is a weak hypothesis because within each of us is the capacity for steadfast hope, but also the limitless despair of a darkest dungeon. So what does it all mean in the end? Let me share with you the hard lesson I have come to know. There are moments in my life when it seemed like the world itself was ending, when the worst thing that could happen did. I wondered how I could live, how I could keep going. And yet, I woke up the next morning and tried again. We all make mistakes, and we all have a choice to make. To dwell in the sins of the past, or to learn from them, and keep moving forward to a brighter future. Until we meet again, the Miskatonic Memorialist.